I need to tell you something that's been destroying me from the inside out for 3 years now. My name is Rebecca, and the day my mother was buried, I made a choice that would ruin everything I ever loved. It was a Tuesday in March when we laid her to rest. The sky was that ugly gray color that makes everything look washed out and dead. Rain came down in sheets, turning the cemetery into a muddy mess. I remember thinking how fitting it was, like even the weather knew something terrible was about to happen. My mom, Patricia, had fought ovarian cancer for 8 months. 8 months of watching her shrink into someone I didn't recognize. 8 months of pretending I believed her when she said she'd beat it. 8 months of knowing, deep down, that I was losing the only person who truly understood me. The funeral was packed. Mom had been a kindergarten teacher for 20 years, and it felt like every parent and kid she'd ever taught showed up. They all said the same things. She was so kind. She touched so many lives. She's in a better place now. I wanted to scream at them. She wasn't in a better place. She was in a box, about to be dropped into the ground, and nothing about that was better. My father, Victor, stood beside me at the graveside. He looked like someone had reached inside him and pulled out everything that made him alive. His suit hung off him. He'd lost 20 pounds during Mom's illness. His eyes were red and empty, staring at the casket like he could bring her back through sheer force of will. My younger brother Kyle kept his arm around our baby sister Tessa. She was only 16, sobbing into his shoulder. Kyle was 19, home from college, trying to be strong for everyone. His jaw was clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might crack. I was 23, fresh out of college, with a degree I didn't know what to do with. I'd moved back home 6 months earlier when Mom got really bad. Someone needed to help with the appointments, the medications, the nights when the pain got so intense she couldn't sleep. Dad had his legal practice to run. Kyle had school. Tessa was still in high school. So it fell to me. I didn't mind. Those months were hell, but they were also the last time I got to really be with my mom. We talked about everything. Her childhood, her dreams, her regrets. She told me she was proud of me. She told me to take care of Dad and my siblings. I promised her I would. God, if only she'd known what I meant when I made that promise. The priest said some generic words about heaven and eternal rest. I didn't hear most of it. I was too busy watching Dad's face crumble as they lowered the casket into the ground. He made this sound, not quite a sob, not quite a gasp, like someone had punched all the air out of his lungs. Tessa threw a white rose onto the casket. Kyle followed with another. Then it was my turn. I dropped my rose and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I didn't know then what I'd eventually need to apologize for. After the burial, everyone came back to our house. The place filled with casseroles and sympathy cards and people who didn't know what to say, so they just hugged us and cried. Aunt Denise, Mom's sister, tried to organize everything, but even she looked lost. By 9 that night, everyone had finally left. The house felt massive and empty, despite the 4 of us still living there. Kyle took Tessa upstairs to bed. I could hear her crying through the walls. I found Dad in his study around 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom's face from that last day. Gray, hollow, barely breathing. Dad was sitting in his leather chair in the dark, still wearing his funeral suit. There was a glass of whiskey on the desk beside him, untouched. He wasn't crying. He wasn't doing anything. Just staring at the wall like he'd forgotten how to be human. "Dad," I said quietly from the doorway. He didn't respond. I walked in and sat on the floor beside his chair. We stayed like that for maybe 20 minutes. Silent. Broken. That's when everything changed. I don't know what possessed me. Grief, maybe. Loneliness. Fear of losing him, too. But I leaned close to him and whispered something I can never take back. "I'm here," I said, my hand on his knee. "I won't leave you alone like she did." The words came out wrong, or maybe they came out exactly how some dark part of me meant them. Dad turned to look at me for the first time. His eyes weren't empty anymore. There was something else there now. Something that made my stomach twist. He put his hand over mine. Neither of us moved, and in that moment, in that quiet study with my mother, barely cold in the ground, a line got drawn between us. A line that shouldn't exist between a father and daughter. A line we were about to cross. I wish I could tell you that night ended with me going to bed and waking up realizing how inappropriate I'd been. But that's not what happened. Dad and I sat there in his study, his hand covering mine on his knee, for what felt like hours. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. The air between us felt electric and wrong and terrifying and somehow comforting. Finally, he squeezed my hand and said, "You should get some sleep." His voice was rough, deeper than usual. I nodded and stood up, but I didn't leave right away. I bent down and kissed the top of his head, something I'd done 1,000 times as a kid. But this time felt different. This time, he closed his eyes, like it hurt. The next 3 weeks were strange. The house felt haunted by Mom's absence. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of her. Her coffee mug still in the cabinet. Her reading glasses on the nightstand. Her handwriting on the grocery list stuck to the fridge. Tessa cried constantly. Kyle threw himself into his college work, barely coming out of his room. Dad went through the motions of living, showering, eating, going to work, but he was just a shell. And me? I became obsessed with taking care of him. I made his coffee every morning exactly how he liked it. I did his laundry. I made sure he ate dinner even when he said he wasn't hungry. I sat with him in the evenings while he pretended to watch television. I told myself I was just keeping my promise to Mom, taking care of the family. But deep down, I knew something had shifted between us that night in his study. He started seeking me out. He'd find reasons to be in whatever room I was in. Our hands would brush when I handed him his coffee. Our eyes would meet across the dinner table and hold for too long. Tessa and Kyle didn't notice. They were drowning in their own grief. But Aunt Denise noticed. She came by one afternoon about 2 weeks after the funeral. I was in the kitchen making lunch when she walked in and found Dad standing behind me, his hand on my shoulder, both of us looking at something on my phone. We jumped apart like we'd been caught doing something wrong, which we hadn't been. Not yet, but Denise's eyes narrowed. "Everything okay here?" she asked carefully. "Fine," Dad said too quickly. "Rebecca was just showing me something about the estate lawyer." Denise looked between us, her expression unreadable. "Victor, can I talk to you privately?" They went into the living room. I couldn't hear what they said, but when Denise left 20 minutes later, She gave me a look that made my skin crawl. That night, Dad came to my room. It was past midnight. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, like every night since Mom died. There was a soft knock on my door. "Rebecca, you awake?" My heart started pounding. "Yeah." The door opened. Dad stood in the hallway, light, looking lost. "I can't sleep," he said. "The bed feels too empty." I should have told him to take a sleeping pill, to call a friend, to see a therapist. Instead, I said, "I can't sleep either." He stepped into my room, closed the door behind him, and suddenly we were in dangerous territory. "I keep thinking about what you said," he whispered, "that night in my study, about not leaving me alone." My mouth went dry. "Dad, did you mean it?" The question hung in the air between us. I could feel every boundary that was supposed to exist, every rule of what was right and wrong, pressing down on us. "Yes," I heard myself say. He sat on the edge of my bed. In the dark, I could barely see his face, but I could feel him shaking. "This is wrong," he said. "I know. Your mother just died. I know. You're my daughter. I know." Silence, heavy and suffocating. Then his hand found mine in the darkness. We sat like that for a long time, holding hands in my childhood bedroom, both of us crying quietly, grieving, breaking. "I can't lose anyone else," he finally said, his voice cracking. "I can't be alone." "You're not alone," I whispered. "I'm here." He pulled me into a hug, a normal father-daughter hug, the kind we'd shared my entire life. Except it didn't feel normal anymore. His arms held me tighter than they should have. My face pressed into his neck in a way that felt too intimate. Our breathing synchronized, and then his hand moved up to cradle the back of my head, fingers tangling in my hair. I tilted my face up toward his. Our eyes met in the darkness. This was the moment we could still stop, the moment we could pull away and pretend this was just grief making us confused. But neither of us pulled away. "Rebecca," he breathed, his face inches from mine. It wasn't a question, it was a surrender. And then his lips brushed against my forehead. Soft, gentle, appropriate. But his lips lingered too long, and when he pulled back, we both knew something irreversible had just happened. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, we just stepped off a cliff. Dad stood up quickly, his breathing ragged. "I should go." "Okay," I whispered. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "This can't happen," he said, not turning around. "I know. We're just grieving. We're not thinking clearly." "I know." Another long pause. "Good night, Rebecca." "Good night, Dad." He left, closing the door softly behind him. I lay back in bed, my heart racing, my whole body trembling. I knew what we'd almost done was unforgivable. I knew Mom would be horrified. I knew this had to stop before it went any further. But here's the thing about forbidden boundaries. Once you get close enough to see over the edge, it becomes almost impossible not to jump. 1 week later, we crossed the line completely, and there was no going back. The box arrived on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after Mom's funeral. Dad had ordered it weeks earlier, before she died, a memory box where he planned to keep her favorite things. Photos, letters, jewelry, little trinkets that reminded him of their life together. He'd forgotten about it until it showed up on the doorstep. I found him in their bedroom, his bedroom now, surrounded by Mom's clothes. He was holding her wedding dress, the one she'd kept preserved in the closet for 25 years. His whole body was shaking with sobs. He was trying to keep quiet. Kyle and Tessa were out. Kyle had driven Tessa to a friend's house, trying to give her some normalcy. The house was empty except for us. "Dad," I said softly from the doorway. He looked up at me, and I'd never seen anyone look so completely shattered. His face was wet with tears, his eyes red and swollen. "I can't do this," he choked out. "I can't pack her away like she was just stuff." I walked into the room and knelt beside him on the floor. "Then don't. Not today." "When?" he asked desperately. "When does it stop hurting?" I didn't have an answer. So I did the only thing I could think of. I wrapped my arms around him. He buried his face in my shoulder and broke down completely. Not the quiet, controlled crying he'd been doing. Real, gut-wrenching sobs that shook both of us. I held him tighter, running my hand through his hair, whispering that it would be okay even though I didn't believe it. "I loved her so much," he gasped between sobs. "I don't know how to exist without her." I know. I'm so alone." "You're not alone. I'm here." He pulled back to look at me, his hands gripping my shoulders. His face was inches from mine, tear-streaked and broken. "You look so much like her," he whispered. "You have her eyes, her smile." It should have been a sweet comment, a grieving husband seeing his late wife in his daughter. But the way he said it, the way he was looking at me, made it something else entirely. "Dad," I breathed, my heart hammering in my chest. His thumb brushed across my cheek, wiping away a tear I didn't know I'd cried. Then his hand slid to the back of my neck. Every alarm in my head was screaming at me to pull away, to stand up, to run out of that room and never look back. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned closer. "We shouldn't," he whispered, but he was already pulling me toward him. "I know. This is wrong. I know. Your mother isn't here anymore," I finished. And that was the truth that broke us both. Mom wasn't here. We were alone in our grief, drowning in it, and we were reaching for each other like lifelines. His lips touched mine. Soft at first, tentative, like he was still giving us both a chance to stop this. But when I kissed him back, something inside both of us snapped. The kiss deepened. His hands tangled in my hair. Mine gripped his shirt. We were both crying and kissing and breaking every rule that should exist between a father and daughter. He pulled me closer, and I let him. We fell back against Mom's clothes scattered on the floor, surrounded by the remnants of the life she'd built, the family she'd loved. And we destroyed it all in that moment. What happened next? I can't give you details. Some things are too painful, too shameful to put into words. But I can tell you this. When it was over, we lay on that bedroom floor among my dead mother's belongings, and neither of us could look at each other. The silence was deafening. Finally, Dad stood up. He didn't say anything, just gathered up his clothes and walked out of the room. I heard the shower turn on in the bathroom down the hall. He stayed in there for over an hour. I got dressed with shaking hands, my whole body numb. I couldn't process what we'd just done. My brain kept trying to rewind, to go back to the moment before it happened and make a different choice. But there was no going back. When Dad finally came out, he looked like a different person. His face was blank, empty. "That can never happen again," he said, his voice flat. I nodded, unable to speak. We were grieving. We weren't thinking clearly. It was a mistake. Okay, I whispered. We'll never talk about this. Ever. Okay. He walked past me without meeting my eyes and went downstairs. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall for 3 hours until Kyle and Tessa came home. At dinner that night, we all pretended everything was normal. Dad asked Tessa about her friend. Kyle talked about an assignment due Monday. I pushed food around my plate and said nothing. But under the table, Dad's foot touched mine, and neither of us moved away. That was the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Because here's what nobody tells you about forbidden things. Once you cross that line, it becomes easier to cross it again, and again, and again. The guilt doesn't stop you. The shame doesn't stop you. The knowledge that you're destroying everything doesn't stop you. You just keep crossing the line until there's no line left at all. Within a week, it happened again. And then again. And before I knew it, we weren't just making a terrible mistake in a moment of grief. We were having an affair. Me and my father. In the house where my mother had just died. And the worst part? I didn't want to stop. 6 months. That's how long our affair lasted before everything exploded. 6 months of living a double life that makes me sick to think about now. During the day, I was just Rebecca, the dutiful daughter helping her family through grief. I cooked meals, did laundry, helped Tessa with homework, made sure everyone was functioning. At night, when Kyle and Tessa were asleep, I became something else entirely. We were careful, obsessively careful. Dad would wait until he heard Kyle's music start playing in his room, until he saw Tessa's light go off. Then he'd text me a single word, now. And I'd sneak down the hall to his bedroom, the bedroom he'd shared with Mom, and we'd do things I can never forgive myself for. Afterward, we'd lie there in the dark, not touching, both drowning in guilt. We have to stop, he'd say every time. This is destroying us. I know, I'd whisper back. But we never stopped. We told ourselves lies to make it bearable, that we were just comforting each other, that grief makes people do crazy things, that it didn't count as real because we both felt so guilty about it. All lies. The truth was simpler and uglier. We were both broken, and we were using each other to feel less alone. I started seeing a pattern in how we justified it. Every time we'd go a few days without being together, something would trigger Dad. A song Mom loved, a smell that reminded him of her, finding one of her old notes. He'd break down, and I'd comfort him, and that comfort would turn physical. It became a cycle. Grief, guilt, physical connection, more guilt, more grief. And round we went. Kyle almost caught us twice. The first time was at 2 a.m. I was leaving Dad's room when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I barely made it back to my room before Kyle walked past to get water from the kitchen. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst through my chest. The second time was worse. Dad and I were in his study, and things had gotten intense. We didn't hear Kyle come downstairs. He knocked on the study door, and we had maybe 3 seconds to separate and look normal before he opened it. Just checking if you guys wanted pizza, Kyle said, looking between us suspiciously. Sure, sounds good, Dad said, his voice too casual. Kyle's eyes lingered on us for a moment too long. You okay, Rebecca? You look flushed. Just warm in here, I lied. After he left, Dad and I didn't speak for the rest of the night. The close call should have scared us into stopping. It didn't. Tessa, thankfully, was oblivious. She was so wrapped up in her own grief and her high school drama that she barely noticed anything else. I was grateful for that, at least. I didn't want her anywhere near the toxic thing Dad and I had become. But other people were starting to notice things. Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor, made a comment one morning when I was getting the mail. "You're taking such good care of your father," she said, her tone strange. "I see your light on very late at night, and your father's light. You two must talk a lot." My blood ran cold. "Just helping him through things," I managed to say. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, dear. Family is so important during hard times." I rushed back inside, my hands shaking. "We need to be more careful," I told Dad that night. "Or we need to stop," he countered. But we didn't stop. At work, Dad's colleagues started commenting on how much better he looked, how he seemed to be handling Patricia's death better than expected. His paralegal, Jennifer, even said something that made my stomach turn. "You're lucky to have Rebecca at home," she told him, within my hearing, at a firm event I'd attended with him. "Having family support makes all the difference." If only she knew what kind of support I was providing. The worst part was how normal we became at hiding it. We developed signals, timing, excuses. We could sit at the dinner table with Kyle and Tessa and act like nothing was happening, then be in each other's arms an hour later. We were getting too comfortable with the lie. I should have known it couldn't last. Around month 4, I started feeling different. Tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings. My period was late, but I chalked it up to stress. Then I was 2 weeks late, then 3. I bought a pregnancy test from a pharmacy 2 towns over, paranoid someone might recognize me. I took it in a gas station bathroom because I couldn't risk taking it at home. 2 lines, positive. I sat on that disgusting bathroom floor and felt my entire world collapse. I was pregnant with my father's baby. The reality of what we'd been doing hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just some shameful secret we could bury. This was real. This had consequences that would last forever. I didn't tell Dad right away. I couldn't. I spent 2 weeks in a fog, trying to figure out what to do. Get an abortion? Keep it? Tell Dad? Run away and never look back? Every option felt impossible. Meanwhile, Aunt Denise was visiting more often. She'd pop by unannounced, her eyes always watching, always suspicious. "You look pale, Rebecca," she said one afternoon. "Are you eating enough?" "Just tired," I lied. "You should see a doctor. Get some vitamins." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had an appointment scheduled with a doctor, but not for vitamins. I was going to confirm the pregnancy and figure out my options. But before I could make it to that appointment, Denise showed up at our house on a Saturday morning, and she found something that would blow our entire world apart. The box arrived on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after Mom's funeral. Dad had ordered it weeks earlier, before she died, a memory box where he planned to keep her favorite things. Photos, letters, jewelry, little trinkets that reminded him of their life together. He'd forgotten about it until it showed up on the doorstep. I found him in their bedroom, his bedroom now, surrounded by Mom's clothes. He was holding her wedding dress, the one she'd kept preserved in the closet for 25 years. His whole body was shaking with sobs. He was trying to keep quiet. Kyle and Tessa were out. Kyle had driven Tessa to a friend's house, trying to give her some normalcy. The house was empty except for us. "Dad," I said softly from the doorway. He looked up at me, and I'd never seen anyone look so completely shattered. His face was wet with tears, his eyes red and swollen. "I can't do this," he choked out. "I can't pack her away like she was just stuff." I walked into the room and knelt beside him on the floor. "Then don't. Not today." "When?" he asked desperately. "When does it stop hurting?" I didn't have an answer, so I did the only thing I could think of. I wrapped my arms around him. He buried his face in my shoulder and broke down completely. Not the quiet, controlled crying he'd been doing. Real, gut-wrenching sobs that shook both of us. I held him tighter, running my hand through his hair, whispering that it would be okay, even though I didn't believe it. "I loved her so much," he gasped between sobs. "I don't know how to exist without her. I know. I'm so alone. You're not alone. I'm here." He pulled back to look at me, his hands gripping my shoulders. His face was inches from mine, tear-streaked and broken. "You look so much like her," he whispered. "You have her eyes, her smile." It should have been a sweet comment, a grieving husband seeing his late wife in his daughter. But the way he said it, the way he was looking at me, made it something else entirely. "Dad," I breathed, my heart hammering in my chest. His thumb brushed across my cheek, wiping away a tear I didn't know I'd cried. Then his hand slid to the back of my neck. Every alarm in my head was screaming at me to pull away, to stand up, to run out of that room and never look back. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned closer. "We shouldn't," he whispered, but he was already pulling me toward him. "I know. This is wrong. I know. Your mother isn't here anymore," I finished. And that was the truth that broke us both. Mom wasn't here. We were alone in our grief, drowning in it, and we were reaching for each other like lifelines. His lips touched mine, soft at first, tentative, like he was still giving us both a chance to stop this. But when I kissed him back, something inside both of us snapped. The kiss deepened, his hands tangled in my hair, mine gripped his shirt. We were both crying and kissing and breaking every rule that should exist between a father and daughter. He pulled me closer, and I let him. We fell back against Mom's clothes scattered on the floor, surrounded by the remnants of the life she'd built, the family she'd loved, and we destroyed it all in that moment. What happened next? I can't give you details. Some things are too painful, too shameful to put into words. But I can tell you this. When it was over, we lay on that bedroom floor among my dead mother's belongings, and neither of us could look at each other. The silence was deafening. Finally, Dad stood up. He didn't say anything, just gathered up his clothes and walked out of the room. I heard the shower turn on in the bathroom down the hall. He stayed in there for over an hour. I got dressed with shaking hands, my whole body numb. I couldn't process what we'd just done. My brain kept trying to rewind, to go back to the moment before it happened and make a different choice. But there was no going back. When Dad finally came out, he looked like a different person. His face was blank, empty. "That can never happen again," he said, his voice flat. I nodded, unable to speak. We were grieving. We weren't thinking clearly. It was a mistake. "Okay," I whispered. We'll never talk about this. Ever. Okay. He walked past me without meeting my eyes and went downstairs. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall for 3 hours until Kyle and Tessa came home. At dinner that night, we all pretended everything was normal. Dad asked Tessa about her friend. Kyle talked about an assignment due Monday. I pushed food around my plate and said nothing. But under the table, Dad's foot touched mine, and neither of us moved away. That was the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Because here's what nobody tells you about forbidden things. Once you cross that line, it becomes easier to cross it again, and again, and again. The guilt doesn't stop you. The shame doesn't stop you. The knowledge that you're destroying everything doesn't stop you. You just keep crossing the line until there's no line left at all. Within a week, it happened again. And then again. And before I knew it, we weren't just making a terrible mistake in a moment of grief. We were having an affair, me and my father, in the house where my mother had just died. And the worst part? I didn't want to stop. 6 months. That's how long our affair lasted before everything exploded. 6 months of living a double life that makes me sick to think about now. During the day, I was just Rebecca, the dutiful daughter helping her family through grief. I cooked meals, did laundry, helped Tessa with homework, made sure everyone was functioning. At night, when Kyle and Tessa were asleep, I became something else entirely. We were careful, obsessively careful. Dad would wait until he heard Kyle's music start playing in his room, until he saw Tessa's light go off. Then he'd text me a single word, "Now," and I'd sneak down the hall to his bedroom, the bedroom he'd shared with Mom, and we'd do things I can never forgive myself for. Afterward, we'd lie there in the dark, not touching, both drowning in guilt. "We have to stop," he'd say every time. "This is destroying us." "I know," I'd whisper back. But we never stopped. We told ourselves lies to make it bearable, that we were just comforting each other, that grief makes people do crazy things, that it didn't count as real because we both felt so guilty about it. All lies. The truth was simpler and uglier. We were both broken, and we were using each other to feel less alone. I started seeing a pattern in how we justified it. Every time we'd go a few days without being together, something would trigger Dad. A song Mom loved, a smell that reminded him of her, finding one of her old notes. He'd break down, and I'd comfort him, and that comfort would turn physical. It became a cycle. Grief, guilt, physical connection, more guilt, more grief. And round we went. Kyle almost caught us twice. The first time was at 2 in the morning. I was leaving Dad's room when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I barely made it back to my room before Kyle walked past to get water from the kitchen. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst through my chest. The second time was worse. Dad and I were in his study, and things had gotten intense. We didn't hear Kyle come downstairs. He knocked on the study door, and we had maybe 3 seconds to separate and look normal before he opened it. "Just checking if you guys wanted pizza," Kyle said, looking between us suspiciously. "Sure, sounds good," Dad said, his voice too casual. Kyle's eyes lingered on us for a moment too long. "You okay, Rebecca? You look flushed." "Just warm in here," I lied. After he left, Dad and I didn't speak for the rest of the night. The close call should have scared us into stopping. It didn't. Tessa, thankfully, was oblivious. She was so wrapped up in her own grief and her high school drama that she barely noticed anything else. I was grateful for that, at least. I didn't want her anywhere near the toxic thing Dad and I had become. But other people were starting to notice things. Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor, made a comment one morning when I was getting the mail. "You're taking such good care of your father," she said, her tone strange. "I see your light on very late at night, and your father's light. You two must talk a lot." My blood ran cold. "Just helping him through things," I managed to say. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, dear, family is so important during hard times." I rushed back inside, my hands shaking. "We need to be more careful," I told Dad that night. "Or we need to stop," he countered. But we didn't stop. At work, Dad's colleagues started commenting on how much better he looked, how he seemed to be handling Patricia's death better than expected. His paralegal, Jennifer, even said something that made my stomach turn. "You're lucky to have Rebecca at home," she told him within my hearing at a firm event I'd attended with him. "Having family support makes all the difference." If only she knew what kind of support I was providing. The worst part was how normal we became at hiding it. We developed signals, timing, excuses. We could sit at the dinner table with Kyle and Tessa and act like nothing was happening, then be in each other's arms an hour later. We were getting too comfortable with the lie. I should have known it couldn't last. Around month 4, I started feeling different, tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings. My period was late, but I chalked it up to stress. Then I was 2 weeks late, then 3. I bought a pregnancy test from a pharmacy 2 towns over, paranoid someone might recognize me. I took it in a gas station bathroom because I couldn't risk taking it at home. 2 lines, positive. I sat on that disgusting bathroom floor and felt my entire world collapse. I was pregnant with my father's baby. The reality of what we'd been doing hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just some shameful secret we could bury. This was real. This had consequences that would last forever. I didn't tell Dad right away. I couldn't. I spent 2 weeks in a fog, trying to figure out what to do. Get an abortion? Keep it? Tell Dad? Run away and never look back? Every option felt impossible. Meanwhile, Aunt Denise was visiting more often. She'd pop by unannounced, her eyes always watching, always suspicious. "You look pale, Rebecca," she said one afternoon. "Are you eating enough?" "Just tired," I lied. "You should see a doctor. Get some vitamins." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had an appointment scheduled with a doctor, but not for vitamins. I was going to confirm the pregnancy and figure out my options. But before I could make it to that appointment, Denise showed up at our house on a Saturday morning. And she found something that would blow our entire world apart. Denise arrived at 8 in the morning on a Saturday in September. No warning, no phone call. Just her Toyota pulling into the driveway while I was making breakfast. Through the kitchen window, I watched her get out of the car, and something about her body language made my stomach drop. She looked determined. Angry, even. Dad was upstairs, still sleeping. Kyle had left early for a study group. Tessa was at a sleepover. It was just me. I opened the door before she could knock. "Aunt Denise, this is unexpected." "I need to talk to your father," she said, pushing past me into the house. "No hug, No smile, just cold determination. He's still asleep. Is everything okay? She turned to face me, and the look in her eyes made me want to run. Is it, Rebecca? Is everything okay here? I don't know what you mean. Don't you? We stared at each other. The air between us felt charged with suspicion and accusation. I'll make coffee, I said finally, needing to escape her gaze. She followed me into the kitchen and sat at the table, watching my every move. I felt like a bug under a microscope. How's your father doing? She asked. Better. Still hard, but he's managing. And you? How are you managing? Fine. We're all fine. Really? Her tone made it clear she didn't believe me. Because Patricia's been gone 6 months, and I've barely heard from either of you. Kyle and Tessa return my calls. You and Victor? Nothing. We've been busy. Busy with what, exactly? She leaned forward. What are you two so busy doing that you can't talk to family? My hands shook as I poured coffee. It's not like that. Then what is it like? I set her mug down too hard, sloshing coffee onto the table. We're grieving, Denise. We're trying to survive. I'm sorry if we haven't been good about returning calls. She studied me for a long moment. You look different. Different how? I can't put my finger on it. But something's changed about you. I couldn't meet her eyes. People change when they lose their mother. That's not what I mean. Before I could respond, Dad came downstairs in his robe, clearly surprised to see Denise. Denise, what are you doing here? I came to check on you both, since you won't answer my calls. We've been managing, Dad said, but his voice was tight. He wouldn't look at me. Rebecca's been a huge help. I'm sure she has. The way Denise said it made me feel dirty. Can I use your bathroom? She asked suddenly. Of course, Dad said. You know where it is. She went upstairs, and Dad and I stood in the kitchen, not speaking. He looked stressed. I felt like I might throw up, and not just from the pregnancy. Denise was upstairs for a long time, too long. When she came back down, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. She was holding something, my prescription bottle of birth control pills, my brand new prescription that I'd gotten just 3 weeks earlier when I thought I might not be pregnant after all, before the test confirmed I was. Want to explain these? She asked, her voice deadly calm. The bottle had my name on it. The prescription date. Everything. Dad's face went white. Those are mine, I said quickly. I can see that. What I can't understand is why you need birth control when you told me weeks ago that you're in a long-distance relationship with someone from college. My mind raced. It's for my periods. They've been irregular. Don't lie to me. Her voice cracked. These are specifically for contraception. The prescription notes say so. She turned to Dad. When did Rebecca start seeing someone, Victor? Because Mrs. Patterson told me something interesting yesterday. Dad's jaw clenched. What did she tell you? That she saw Rebecca leaving your bedroom at 3 a.m. last week. Denise's hands were shaking so hard the pill bottle rattled. She said it wasn't the first time. She said she's seen it multiple times over the past few months. The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. It's not what you think, Dad said, but his voice had no conviction. Really? Denise's eyes filled with tears. Because what I think is that my sister isn't even cold in the ground, And you two are... She couldn't finish, her face twisted with disgust. Denise, please, I started. Don't. She held up her hand. Don't you dare try to explain this to me. She set the pill bottle on the counter like it was contaminated. I don't know what's been going on in this house, but I'm going to find out. And if it's what I think it is... Her voice broke. Patricia would be devastated. Absolutely devastated. We're not... Dad tried again. Spare me. Denise grabbed her purse. I'm giving you both a chance to come clean right now. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me that my mind is playing tricks on me and that you haven't been doing what I think you've been doing. Neither of us could speak. The silence was its own confession. Denise's face crumpled. Oh my God, it's true. It's complicated, I whispered. Complicated? She laughed, but it was a horrible sound. There's nothing complicated about a father sleeping with his daughter. That's not complicated, Rebecca. That's sick. The word hung in the air like poison. You have until tomorrow, Denise said, her voice shaking with rage and disgust. Rebecca, you pack your things and you leave this house. You find somewhere else to live. I don't care where, but you don't stay here. Denise, she's my daughter, Dad started. Then ACT like her father, she screamed. Not like... She couldn't even say it. She walked to the door, then turned back. If Rebecca isn't gone by tomorrow night, I'm telling everyone. Kyle, Tessa, your firm, the whole family. Everyone will know what you've done. Please, I begged. Please don't tell Tessa. She doesn't need to know. Should have thought about that before you started sleeping with your own father. Denise's face was wet with tears. I loved you, Rebecca. Both of you. And you've destroyed everything Patricia built, everything she loved. She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. Dad and I stood frozen in the kitchen. I'll start packing, I said quietly. But I knew packing was the least of our problems. Because I was pregnant. And I still hadn't told him. Mrs. Patterson had been watching us the entire time. I didn't realize it until that afternoon, after Denise left, and I was sitting on my bed trying to figure out how my life had imploded so completely. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry I had to tell your aunt, but what you're doing is wrong. Eleanor Patterson. My blood turned to ice. She had my number. She'd been paying attention, and she'd actively reached out to Denise to tell her what she'd seen. I ran downstairs to find Dad in his study, staring blankly at his computer screen. Mrs. Patterson texted me, I said, showing him my phone. His face went gray. What does she want? Nothing. She said she's sorry she had to tell Denise. Dad stood up and walked to the window that overlooked Mrs. Patterson's house. How long has she been watching? I don't know. We stood there in silence, both of us realizing that our secret had never been as secret as we thought. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Patterson herself. She stood on our porch in her floral dress and cardigan, looking like everyone's sweet grandmother. But her eyes were hard and judgmental. Victor, may I come in? She asked. Dad's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside to let her enter. I stayed in the hallway, partially hidden, but close enough to hear everything. Mrs. Patterson sat on our couch like she owned it. I suppose Denise told you that I spoke with her. You had no right, Dad started. I had every right, she interrupted. I've lived next door to your family for 15 years. I watched your children grow up. I brought casseroles when Patricia got sick. I cried at her funeral. Then why would you? Because what you're doing dishonors her memory. Mrs. Patterson's voice was steel. I started noticing things about 6 weeks ago. Rebecca's car would be in the driveway, but I'd see her light go off at midnight. Then, 20 minutes later, I'd see her shadow pass by your bedroom window. My stomach twisted. She'd been tracking our movements. At first, I thought maybe she was checking on you, that you were having nightmares or something. But then it kept happening. Every few nights. Always late. Always when Kyle and Tessa were asleep. Dad sat down heavily. Eleanor. Then I saw her leaving your room at 3 a.m, wearing what was clearly sleepwear, not the clothes she'd worn to dinner. Mrs. Patterson's hands were folded primly in her lap, but her knuckles were white. I've been around long enough to know what I was seeing. You don't know anything, I said, stepping into the room. She turned to look at me, and her expression made me feel like something she'd scraped off her shoe. Don't I? Then explain the birth control prescription, dear. Explain why a young woman, supposedly in a long-distance relationship, needs contraception while living in her father's house. I had no answer. I prayed about it, Mrs. Patterson continued. I didn't want to believe it. I kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. But then last week, I saw you two in the kitchen at midnight, through my window. The way he touched your face, the way you looked at him. She shook her head slowly. That wasn't a father comforting his daughter. That was something else entirely. Why tell Denise? Dad asked, his voice hollow. Why not mind your own business? Because Tessa still lives in this house. Mrs. Patterson's calm cracked for the first time. That child lost her mother, and now she's living under the same roof as this. What if she finds out? What will that do to her? The mention of Tessa hit like a physical blow. Neither Dad nor I had thought about what this would do to her if she found out. I called Denise because she's family, and she has a right to know. Because someone needs to protect the children in this situation. Mrs. Patterson stood up. I won't tell anyone else. That's for Denise to decide. But I want Rebecca out of this house by tomorrow. Just like Denise said. This is my home, I said weakly. This was your mother's home. Mrs. Patterson corrected. And you've defiled it. Both of you have. She walked to the door, then paused. Patricia was my friend. We had coffee together every Sunday morning for 10 years. She talked about you constantly, Rebecca. About how proud she was of you. About how you were going to do amazing things with your life. Her eyes filled with tears. If she knew what you'd become, it would break her heart all over again. After she left, Dad and I sat in silence for a long time. How many other people know? I finally asked. I don't know. What if she tells someone besides Denise? She said she wouldn't. But what if she does? Dad put his head in his hands. Then we're finished. My career, my reputation, our family, everything will be destroyed. Maybe we deserve that, I whispered. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw real clarity in his eyes, not the fog of grief or the haze of whatever twisted thing we'd been calling our relationship, just clear, horrified understanding. This has to end, he said, right now, today. We can never be like that again. I know. You need to leave tomorrow, like Denise said. Find an apartment. Start over somewhere else. Okay. And we never speak of this again. Ever. To anyone. Okay. But I still hadn't told him about the pregnancy. And as I went upstairs to start packing my life into boxes, I realized I had a choice to make. Tell him now and deal with his reaction while everything was already falling apart. Or leave tomorrow and never tell him at all. Carry this secret alone forever. Let him think the affair was just a terrible mistake we could both move past. Never let him know that there was a permanent consequence growing inside me. I spent the whole night packing and trying to decide which choice would hurt less. By morning, I still didn't know, but time was running out to choose. The phone call came at midnight. I was in my room, surrounded by half-packed boxes, when I heard Dad's phone ring downstairs. Then I heard his voice, sharp and defensive. "Denise, it's midnight." Even through the floor, I could hear her screaming. I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding. "I don't know what you think you know," Dad tried to say. "Don't lie to me." Denise's voice was so loud it distorted through the phone speaker. "Mrs. Patterson told me everything. How long, Victor? How long have you been sleeping with your own daughter?" Silence. "Answer me." "Denise, please. You have to understand." "Understand? Understand." Her voice cracked with rage and pain. "My sister isn't even cold in the ground. You buried her 3 months ago, and you've been doing this? With Rebecca?" I sat down on the top step, my whole body shaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen," Dad said, and he sounded broken. "We were both grieving. We weren't thinking clearly." "Oh, you were thinking clearly enough to make sure Kyle and Tessa didn't find out. You were thinking clearly enough to sneak around, to lie to everyone. I know it's unforgivable. Unforgivable doesn't even begin to cover it." Denise was crying now, her words coming out in gasps. "Patricia loved you both so much. She trusted you to take care of each other after she was gone. And this is how you honor her memory? By destroying everything she built? We're ending it," Dad said desperately. "Rebecca's leaving tomorrow. It's over." "It will never be over," Denise screamed. "Do you understand that? This will follow you both forever. And those kids, Kyle and Tessa, what happens when they find out? Because they will find out, Victor. Secrets like this always come out. They don't need to know. Nobody needs to know. I need to know." Denise's voice broke completely. "I need to understand how my brother-in-law and my niece could do something so disgusting, so wrong. Patricia was my sister, and you've destroyed her memory. We didn't mean to. I don't care what you meant. I care what you did." There was a long pause. I could hear Denise breathing hard, trying to calm down. "How long?" she asked again, quieter this time, but somehow more terrifying. "I need to know. How long has this been going on?" Another silence. 6 months, Dad finally admitted. The sound Denise made was somewhere between a sob and a scream. 6 months. You've been doing this for 6 months? Yes. Oh my God. Oh my God. She was hyperventilating. Right after the funeral? Is that when it started? A few weeks after. A few weeks. Denise laughed, but it was a horrible sound. Patricia died thinking you two would take care of each other. She made Rebecca promise to look after you. And you twisted that into this? I know. I know how it sounds. Do you? Do you really? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you used your daughter's grief to manipulate her into a sexual relationship. That's not what happened, Dad's voice rose. It wasn't like that. We both... He stopped. You both what? You both wanted it? Is that what you were going to say? No answer. That makes it worse, Victor. Don't you see that? If you'd at least been drunk or out of your mind with grief, there'd be some excuse. But you're saying you both consciously chose to do this over and over for 6 months. We were broken, Dad said quietly. Both of us. We were drowning, and we grabbed onto each other. You're her father. You don't get to grab onto your daughter like that. You're supposed to protect her, not... Denise's voice dropped to something cold and deadly. I want Rebecca out of that house by tomorrow night. Not 1 day later. Tomorrow. She's packing now, and I'm taking Tessa. The words hung in the air like a bomb. What? Dad said. You heard me. I'm filing for emergency custody of Tessa. She's not staying in that house another day. You can't do that. Watch me. I'll tell the court exactly what's been happening. I'll bring Mrs. Patterson as a witness. I'll bring the birth control prescription. I'll bring everything. Denise, please, think about what that will do to Tessa. She doesn't know anything about this. Don't drag her into it. You dragged her into it the moment you started sleeping with her sister under the same roof. Denise was crying again. She deserves better than this. Better than you. She needs her family. Her family is sick. Her family is twisted and broken. I'm the only sane one left, and I'm getting her out of there before this poison spreads to her, too. I'm still her father. You lost the right to call yourself a father when you started fighting your daughter. The profanity sounded shocking coming from Denise, who never cursed. Real fathers don't do what you did. Real fathers protect their children. They don't prey on them when they're vulnerable. I never preyed on anyone. Then what do you call it? She was grieving her mother. She was lost and alone, and you took advantage of that. She's 23 years old. She made her own choices. She's your daughter. There is no world where that's okay, no circumstance, no excuse. I heard something crash downstairs. Dad had thrown something. I know, he yelled. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think I hate myself for it? Don't you think I wake up every morning wanting to die because of what I've done? Good, Denise said coldly. You should hate yourself. You should never forgive yourself, because what you've done is unforgivable. Silence. I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow, Denise said. I'm getting Tessa out of there, and if you fight me on this, I'll make sure everyone knows why. Your firm, your friends, everyone. You said you wouldn't tell anyone. That was before I knew it had been going on for 6 months. Her voice rose again. I thought it was maybe once, a terrible mistake. But 6 months? That's not a mistake, Victor. That's a choice, a pattern. That's sick. What do you want from me? Dad asked, defeated. I want you to let Tessa go without a fight. I want Rebecca gone by tomorrow. And I want both of you to get therapy, because whatever broke inside you that let this happen needs to be fixed before you destroy anyone else. Okay, Dad whispered. And Victor? If I ever find out you've contacted Rebecca inappropriately again, I'm going to the police. I don't care if they can't charge you with anything. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. The call ended. I sat on the stairs, tears streaming down my face, one hand on my stomach. Tomorrow I'd have to leave. Tomorrow I'd have to decide whether to tell Dad about the baby. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, I needed to tell him the truth. Because Denise was right about one thing. Secrets always come out. And this secret was already growing inside me. I found Dad in his study an hour after the call with Denise. He was sitting in the dark, a glass of whiskey in his hand, actually drinking it this time. His face was wet with tears. "Dad," I said softly from the doorway. He didn't look up. "You should be packing. I need to tell you something first." "There's nothing left to say, Rebecca. Denise is right about all of it. What we did was unforgivable." I stepped into the room, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. "Dad, I'm pregnant." The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. For a long moment, he just stared at the broken glass and spilled whiskey. Then slowly, very slowly, he lifted his eyes to meet mine. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant." My voice shook. "About 2 months along." His face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Shock, horror, disbelief, something that might have been hope. Then disgust, whether at me or himself. I couldn't tell. "That's impossible. You were on birth control." I started taking it after I found out. The prescription Denise found? That was because I panicked and thought maybe I wasn't pregnant after all. But I took a test 2 weeks ago. It was positive. Dad stood up, stumbling slightly, stepping over the broken glass. "You've known for 2 weeks, and you didn't tell me." "I didn't know how." 2 weeks, Rebecca. I was scared. Tears streamed down my face. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. He paced the room like a caged animal. "This can't be happening. This can't be real." "It is real." He stopped pacing and looked at me, and his expression made my blood run cold. "You have to get rid of it." The words hit me like a slap. "What?" "You have to terminate the pregnancy as soon as possible." I stepped back. "I can't believe you just said that. Rebecca, think about this rationally. If you have this baby, everything comes out. Everyone will know. They'll do the math. They'll figure it out. So your concern isn't the baby, it's your reputation. My concern is your life." He grabbed my shoulders. "Do you understand what will happen to you if people find out? You'll be labeled forever. Everywhere you go, people will whisper about you. You'll never escape it." I pulled away from him. "And you? What happens to you?" "My life is already over. My career, my family. Denise is taking Tessa tomorrow. Kyle will find out eventually. I'm finished. But you're only 23. You have your whole life ahead of you. A life without this baby. Yes." His voice broke. "A life without a constant reminder of the most shameful thing you've ever done. A life where you can move forward and heal and maybe someday forgive yourself." "This isn't just about shame," I said quietly. "This is a person, a baby." "It's not a baby yet. It's a cluster of cells, a mistake that can still be corrected." The clinical way he said it made me feel sick. "Is that all it is to you? A mistake to be corrected? What else could it possibly be?" He stared at me like I was insane. "You can't seriously be considering keeping it." "I don't know what I'm considering. I haven't had time to think." "Then think now." He grabbed my arms again, his grip almost painful. "Think about what having this baby means. You'll have to explain to everyone who the father is. And if you lie, that child will grow up with questions. Questions that will lead back to the truth eventually. So we tell the truth. The truth will destroy us both. He was shaking me now, and it will destroy that child too. Do you want to bring a baby into the world with that hanging over them? Do you want them to grow up knowing how they were conceived? I hadn't thought about that. What it would mean for the child to know their parents were father and daughter. You have to get rid of it, Dad said again. Quieter this time, but somehow more intense. It's the only option. It's my body, my choice. Your choice affects both of us. It's growing inside me, I screamed. Not you. I'm the one who has to make this decision. We stared at each other, both breathing hard. If you keep it, Dad said slowly, I can't be in its life. I won't acknowledge it. I'll deny everything. His words felt like betrayal, piled on top of betrayal. You'd abandon your own child? It's not a child yet, and if it becomes one, it can't be mine. Not publicly, not ever. His face was hard now, cold. I'll deny we ever had a relationship. I'll say you're making it up. I'll say you're mentally unstable from grief. You'd lie? After everything? To protect us both? Yes, absolutely. I felt something break inside me. Whatever twisted connection we'd had, whatever we'd convinced ourselves we were doing, shattered in that moment. I don't know you, I whispered. I thought I did, but I don't know who you are at all. I'm someone trying to survive the worst mistake of his life. He turned away from me. Go to bed, Rebecca. Figure out what you're going to do. But whatever you decide, you need to leave tomorrow. Denise will be here at noon to get Tessa. What will you tell her about why I'm leaving? That you found an apartment, that you need space, that it's time for you to start your own life. He poured another whiskey. The same lies we've been telling everyone for 6 months. I stood there for a moment, one hand unconsciously moving to my stomach. Inside me was a life that shouldn't exist. A baby conceived in grief and shame, and something we'd tried to call love, but was really just two broken people using each other. And now I had to decide what to do about it. Keep it and face the consequences, or terminate it and try to move on with my life. Either choice felt like losing. I'm sorry, I whispered, though I didn't know if I was apologizing to Dad, to Mom, to the baby inside me, or to myself. Dad didn't respond. Just stood with his back to me, drinking whiskey in the dark. I went back to my room and continued packing. By morning, I'd made my decision, and it would change everything that came next. I decided to keep the baby. I know that sounds crazy given everything I just told you, but in that dark bedroom surrounded by boxes with my hand on my stomach, I couldn't imagine making it disappear. Maybe it was selfish, maybe it was another terrible decision in a long line of them, but it was mine, and I was keeping it. I didn't tell Dad my decision that night. I planned to leave in the morning, find somewhere to stay, and figure out the rest later. But fate had other plans. Kyle came home early. His girlfriend had broken up with him, and he decided to come home for the weekend to clear his head. He wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday, but he walked through the door at 11 on Saturday night. I was carrying a box down the stairs when I heard his key in the lock. Rebecca, he called out, why are all the lights on? I froze halfway down the stairs, the box still in my arms. Kyle stepped into the hallway and saw me. Then he saw the boxes stacked by the door. What's going on? Are you moving out? Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual. Found a place closer to the city. Better job opportunities. His eyes narrowed. At midnight. You're packing at midnight? Couldn't sleep. He didn't believe me. I could see it on his face. Where's Dad? In his study. Kyle walked past me toward the study. I wanted to stop him, to warn him somehow, but I didn't know what to say. I set the box down and followed him. Dad was still drinking. The bottle of whiskey was half empty now, and he looked like hell. Dad, Kyle said from the doorway. You okay? Fine, Dad slurred slightly. Just a rough night. Rebecca says she's moving out. Yes, it's time. She needs her own space. Kyle looked between us, his expression suspicious. This is sudden. What happened? Nothing happened, I said quickly. I just need to start my own life. At midnight? With no warning? Kyle crossed his arms. Something's going on. I can feel it. Kyle, just drop it, Dad said. No, I won't drop it. This family has been weird for months. You two are always whispering, always disappearing into rooms together. Denise keeps calling, and you never answer. Tessa's barely holding it together, and now Rebecca's suddenly moving out in the middle of the night. It's not the middle of the night, I started. What is going on? Kyle shouted. The house went silent. Dad and I looked at each other. In that moment, we both knew we had a choice. Lie and hope Kyle dropped it, or tell him some version of the truth and hope he'd understand. We should have lied. Your father and I had a disagreement, I said carefully. About my future. It's better if I move out. Disagreement about what? Just different perspectives on what I should do with my life. Kyle stared at me. You're lying. You're both lying to me. Kyle, I'm not stupid. His voice cracked. I've watched you two for months. The way you look at each other. The way you act. Something is seriously wrong here. Dad stood up, swaying slightly from the alcohol. Son, you need to trust that some things are private. Private? Kyle laughed bitterly. Mom's been dead for 6 months, and this family is falling apart. Nothing's private anymore. He turned to me. Is he hurting you? Is that what this is? Because if he's done something to you, you can tell me. I'll protect you. The concern in his voice broke my heart. He hasn't hurt me, I said softly. Then what? I looked at Dad. He shook his head, almost imperceptibly, begging me not to say anything. But I was tired, so tired of lying, of carrying this weight alone. We made a mistake, I heard myself say. What kind of mistake? Dad moved toward me. Rebecca, don't. What kind of mistake? Kyle repeated, his voice rising. After Mom died, we were both grieving. We weren't thinking clearly, and things happened that shouldn't have happened. Kyle's face went pale. What things? The silence stretched out. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Rebecca, Kyle said slowly. What things? We crossed boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, I whispered. I watched understanding dawn on Kyle's face. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. No, he said. No, you don't mean... Neither Dad nor I spoke. Tell me I'm wrong, Kyle said, his voice shaking. Tell me you're not saying what I think you're saying. Kyle, Dad started. Tell me I'm wrong. You're not wrong, I whispered. Kyle stumbled backward like I'd pushed him, his face twisted with horror and disgust. You two, you and Dad, you've been... He couldn't finish the sentence. His hands were shaking. Mom just died. She just died. I know, I said, tears streaming down my face. She loved you both so much. Kyle's voice broke. She trusted you. She made you promise to take care of each other. And you? You did this? It was a mistake, Dad tried to say. A mistake, Kyle screamed. A mistake is forgetting to lock the door. A mistake is burning dinner. This isn't a mistake. This is sick. He looked at me with such betrayal in his eyes. You're my sister. He's our father. How could you? We were grieving. Don't you dare use Mom's death as an excuse. Kyle was crying now, angry tears rolling down his face. Don't you dare dishonor her memory like that. He turned to Dad. And you? You're supposed to protect her. You're supposed to be her father. Not... I know what I'm supposed to be, Dad said quietly. Do you? Because right now, I don't know what you are. I don't know either of you. Kyle backed toward the door. How long? How long has this been going on? Neither of us answered. How long? 6 months, Dad admitted. Kyle made a sound like he'd been punched. 6 months. Oh my God, 6 months. He looked around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. We had dinner together. We watched movies. We celebrated Tessa's birthday. And the whole time, you two were... He couldn't finish. Does Tessa know? He asked suddenly. No, I said quickly. She doesn't know anything. Does anyone else know? Denise, Dad said. And Mrs. Patterson. Jesus Christ. Kyle ran his hands through his hair. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. He looked at me, and I saw something change in his face. A decision being made. I can't be here, he said. I can't look at either of you right now. Kyle, please. I reached for him. He jerked away from my touch. Don't touch me. He grabbed his car keys from the table by the door. Where are you going? Dad asked. Kyle turned back one last time, his face hard. Away from you. Both of you. I need to think about what I'm going to do with this information. What does that mean? I asked, fear creeping into my voice. It means I'm deciding whether or not I can live with keeping this secret. He looked at us both with disgust. Mom deserved better than this, than you. And then he was gone. I heard his car start, then the sound of tires on gravel as he peeled out of the driveway. Dad and I stood in the hallway, frozen. He's going to tell people, I said. I know. What do we do? I don't know. We stood there for a long time, waiting for our world to completely fall apart. It didn't take long. 2 hours later, there was a knock at the door. It was the police. Kyle had reported us. There were 2 officers at the door, a man in his 40s with graying hair and tired eyes, a woman in her 30s with a notepad in her hand. Victor Hartley, the male officer asked. Dad nodded, his face ashen. I'm Officer Mitchell. This is Officer Santos. We need to ask you and your daughter some questions. May we come in? Dad stepped aside. My legs felt like they might give out. We sat in the living room, me and Dad on one couch, the officers across from us. Officer Santos pulled out her notepad. Officer Mitchell studied us both with an expression I couldn't read. We received a report tonight, Officer Mitchell said. From your son, Kyle. He claims that you two have been engaged in an inappropriate relationship. The words hung in the air. Is this true? Officer Santos asked. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. We'd like to speak to you separately, Officer Mitchell said. Rebecca, would you mind stepping into the kitchen with Officer Santos? My heart was pounding so hard, I thought everyone could hear it. I followed Officer Santos into the kitchen while Officer Mitchell stayed with Dad. Officer Santos sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for me to do the same. Rebecca, I know this is difficult, but I need you to be honest with me. Has your father been involved with you sexually? The bluntness of the question made me flinch. I'm 23, I said. I'm an adult. That's not what I asked. I stared at the table. Yes. Officer Santos wrote something down. Was this relationship consensual? Yes. Did your father ever force you to do anything you didn't want to do? No. Did he use his position as your father to pressure you in any way? No. We were both grieving. My mother died 6 months ago. I'm sorry for your loss. Officer Santos's voice softened slightly, but I need to understand the nature of this relationship. How did it start? I told her everything. The night of the funeral, the whispered words, the first time we crossed the line. All of it. She took notes, her expression neutral. Are you currently pregnant? She asked suddenly. I froze. How did you know? Your brother mentioned it in his report. He said he overheard a conversation tonight between you and your father about a pregnancy. Damn it, Kyle. He'd heard more than I thought. Yes, I admitted. I'm pregnant. Is your father the biological father of the baby? Yes. More notes. Have you seen a doctor? Not yet. Do you intend to continue the pregnancy? Yes, I think so. Officer Santos looked up from her notepad. Rebecca, I want you to understand something. In this state, there's no law against consensual relations between adult family members. It's morally questionable, yes, but it's not technically illegal. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by shame that I felt relieved. However, she continued, we still need to investigate to ensure this was truly consensual and that no coercion occurred, particularly given the power dynamic between a father and daughter, especially during a vulnerable time like grief. It was consensual, I said firmly. I made my own choices. Terrible choices, but mine. We talked for another 30 minutes. She asked about my mental state, about whether Dad had ever been inappropriate with me before Mom died, about whether he'd ever been inappropriate with Tessa. That last question made me sick. Never, I said forcefully. This was just between us. Tessa doesn't know anything. Please, she's only 16. Don't drag her into this. We're not here to hurt your family more than it's already been hurt, Officer Santos said. We're here to make sure no one's being exploited or abused. In the living room, I could hear Officer Mitchell's voice asking Dad similar questions. After what felt like hours, the officers reconvened in the hallway, speaking quietly to each other. Then they came back into the living room, where Dad and I were sitting, not looking at each other. Based on our preliminary investigation, Officer Mitchell said, we're not finding evidence of criminal activity. Both of you maintain that the relationship was consensual, that no coercion occurred, and that you're both adults. I wanted to feel relieved, but Officer Santos kept talking. However, we're going to file a report with Child Protective Services regarding Tessa. Given the nature of what's been occurring in this home, we need to ensure she's in a safe environment. She is safe, Dad said desperately. I would never. I'm sure you wouldn't intentionally harm her, Officer Mitchell interrupted. But this situation demonstrates a serious lapse in judgment and boundaries. CPS will need to evaluate whether she should remain in your custody. Dad's face crumbled. First, Denise was taking Tessa, and now CPS was getting involved. We're also recommending that both of you seek immediate counseling," Officer Santos added. "What you've been doing may not be illegal, but it's clearly a symptom of unresolved grief and extremely poor judgment." She closed her notepad and stood up. "We'll be filing our report. CPS will contact you within 48 hours. In the meantime, Rebecca, given your age and the voluntary nature of this relationship, we're not placing any restrictions on your movements, but I'd strongly suggest you find somewhere else to stay, as you'd originally planned." After they left, Dad and I sat in silence. "Kyle told them everything," I finally said. "He did what he thought was right. He destroyed us. We destroyed ourselves," Dad said quietly. "Kyle just made sure everyone knew about it." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I did what I had to do. I can't keep this secret. I can't be part of this. Don't contact me. Kyle." I showed the text to Dad. "He's gone," I said. "We've lost him." "We've lost everyone," Dad replied, "and we deserve it." The next morning, Denise arrived with a lawyer to pick up Tessa. The look on Denise's face when she walked in told me she knew about the police visit. "Kyle called me," she said coldly. "Told me everything. About the investigation, about the pregnancy." Her eyes moved to my stomach with undisguised disgust. "You're actually keeping it. That's my choice. Your choice." She laughed bitterly. "You've made nothing but terrible choices for 6 months." Tessa came downstairs with a bag packed, looking confused and scared. "Aunt Denise, what's going on? Why am I leaving?" "We'll talk about it in the car, honey," Denise said gently, her tone completely different when speaking to Tessa. Tessa looked at me, then at Dad. Did something happen? Why won't anyone tell me what's going on? "Sometimes families just need space," Denise said, taking Tessa's bag. "You're going to stay with me for a while." "But why?" "We'll talk in the car." I watched my baby sister leave, probably for the last time, with no idea why her family was falling apart. After they were gone, Dad turned to me. "You need to go, too." "I know." "And Rebecca." I looked at him. "I meant what I said last night, about the baby. I can't be part of its life. I won't acknowledge it. If anyone asks, I'll deny everything." His words felt like the final nail in the coffin of whatever we'd been to each other. "Understood," I said. I finished packing and left that afternoon. I never lived in that house again. The court hearing for Tessa's custody was 3 weeks later. I wasn't required to be there, but Denise's lawyer subpoenaed me. They wanted me to testify. I sat in the hallway, outside the courtroom, 4 months pregnant now, my stomach just starting to show under loose clothing. Dad was inside already with his lawyer. We hadn't spoken since I'd moved out. Kyle was there too, sitting as far away from me as possible. When our eyes met, he looked away. My brother hated me. I could feel it from across the hallway. Denise arrived with Tessa. My sister looked thin and tired, with dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me, she stopped walking. "Rebecca?" I stood up. "Hey, Tess." She stared at my stomach. "Are you—" I couldn't lie to her. "Yes." "Who's the father?" The question hung between us. Denise put her hand on Tessa's shoulder. "We'll talk about everything later, honey." "No." Tessa pulled away. "Everyone's been treating me like a child, like I can't handle whatever's going on. But something happened. Something bad, and nobody will tell me what." She looked at Kyle. "You know, I can tell you know. What happened?" Kyle's face was pained. "Tessa, tell me." Denise's lawyer came out. "We're ready. Tessa, you'll be waiting in a separate room. You won't have to testify." "Why not? This is about me, isn't it? About whether I stay with Dad or go with Aunt Denise." "Yes," the lawyer said, "but we don't think it's appropriate for you to hear the details of this case." "What details? What is everyone hiding from me?" Nobody answered. They led Tessa to a private room. She went reluctantly, looking back at us with confusion and hurt in her eyes. Then Denise's lawyer called me into the courtroom. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Dad sat at one table with his lawyer, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Denise sat at another table with her lawyer, her face set in determination. I was sworn in and took the witness stand. Denise's lawyer, a woman named Ms. Brennan, approached me with a sympathetic expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Rebecca, can you tell the court about your relationship with your father following your mother's death?" My mouth went dry. "We were close. We were both grieving." "How close?" I looked at Dad. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. "Very close," I admitted. "Can you describe the nature of that closeness?" "Objection." Dad's lawyer stood up. "Relevance?" "Your Honor, the nature of the relationship between the respondent and his adult daughter is directly relevant to whether his 16-year-old daughter should remain in his custody," Ms. Brennan argued. "Overruled," the judge said. "Answer the question, Miss Hartley." I took a breath. My father and I engaged in a physical relationship for approximately 6 months following my mother's death. The court reporter's fingers paused on her keyboard for just a moment before continuing. "By physical relationship, you mean sexual?" Ms. Brennan asked. "Yes." "And this occurred in the home where your 16-year-old sister also lived?" "Yes." "Were you coerced in any way?" "No, it was consensual." "But you were grieving your mother." "You were in a vulnerable state. Your father, as the authority figure in the home, held significant power over you." Objection. Dad's lawyer stood again, leading the witness. Sustained. Ms. Brennan adjusted her approach. "Rebecca, are you currently pregnant?" "Yes." "Is your father the biological father of your unborn child?" The courtroom went completely silent. "Yes," I whispered. I heard someone gasp in the gallery. Probably a court observer or someone from Dad's firm who'd come to watch. Ms. Brennan let the admission sink in before continuing. "So to be clear, you became pregnant as a result of a sexual relationship with your father, which occurred in the same home where your minor sister lived?" "Yes." "Did your sister know about this relationship?" "No, we kept it hidden from her." "And from your brother?" "Yes." "Until he discovered it accidentally." "What was his reaction when he discovered it?" "He was horrified. He reported us to the police because he felt his sister was being exploited." Objection. Dad's lawyer was on his feet. Speculation about Kyle Hartley's motivations. "I'll rephrase," Ms. Brennan said. "Did your brother express concern for your well-being?" "Yes." "Did he express concern about your younger sister living in that environment?" "Yes." Ms. Brennan walked back to her table and picked up a document. The police report from that night states that Kyle Hartley was, quote, "visibly distressed and concerned about his 16-year-old sister's safety." Does that sound accurate? Yes. She set the document down and turned back to me. Rebecca, in your opinion, is your father capable of maintaining appropriate boundaries with his daughters? Objection. Dad's lawyer was practically shouting now. The witness is not qualified to make that assessment. Your Honor, she's the most qualified person in this room to answer that question. Ms. Brennan shot back. She's lived it. I'll allow it, the judge said, leaning forward with interest. Answer the question, Miss Hartley. I looked at Dad, really looked at him. He was crying silently, tears rolling down his face. I don't know, I said honestly. I want to believe he'd never do anything inappropriate with Tessa, but 6 months ago, I would have said he'd never do anything inappropriate with me either. And I was wrong. Dad's face crumpled. No further questions, Ms. Brennan said. Dad's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He was an older man named Mr. Peterson, who'd worked with Dad's firm for years. Rebecca, you've stated multiple times that your relationship with your father was consensual, correct? Yes. You're 23 years old, an adult capable of making your own decisions. Yes. You pursued this relationship as much as your father did? I hesitated. We both participated. But specifically, were there times when you initiated physical contact? I didn't want to answer, but I was under oath. Yes. So this wasn't a case of a predator and victim. This was two grieving adults making terrible choices together? I suppose so. Has your father ever shown inappropriate interest in your younger sister? No, never. Has he ever been inappropriate with you before your mother's death? No. So this relationship was an aberration. A response to extraordinary grief, not a pattern of predatory behavior? Objection, Ms. Brennan called out, leading. Sustained. Mr. Peterson tried again. In your observation, has your father been a good parent to Tessa? Yes, he loves her. Has he ever hurt her or neglected her? No. Do you believe he would hurt her? I wanted to say no. I wanted to defend him, but I'd learned the hard way that I didn't know what Dad was capable of anymore. I don't think he would intentionally hurt her, I said carefully. But I also don't think he intended to hurt me. And he did. Mr. Peterson looked frustrated. No further questions. I was dismissed. As I walked past Dad's table, he reached out like he might touch my arm, but I moved away. Outside the courtroom, I found Kyle in the hallway. Kyle, I said, can we talk? No. Please. I need you to understand. Understand what? He finally looked at me, his eyes red. That you and Dad destroyed our family. That Mom's barely been gone half a year, and you two were doing that? That I have to live with knowing what you did? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back my family. His voice cracked. I loved you, Rebecca. You were my big sister, my hero. And now, when I look at you, all I see is someone I don't recognize. I'm still me. No, you're not. He walked away, then turned back one last time. And that baby you're carrying? I hope you understand what you've done to it. Because that child is going to grow up with this, hanging over them forever. He left before I could respond. The judge's ruling came 2 hours later. Temporary custody of Tessa was granted to Denise. Dad would have supervised visitation rights pending a psychological evaluation. When Denise led Tessa out of the courthouse, My baby sister finally looked at me. "It's true, isn't it?" she said. "That's why everyone's acting weird. That's why I can't live with Dad anymore. Something happened between you two." I couldn't speak. Tessa's face twisted with disgust and betrayal. "Oh my God, it is true. Tessa, don't." She held up her hand. "Don't talk to me. Don't call me. Don't try to explain. You're my sister. You stopped being my sister when you did whatever you did with Dad." Tears streamed down her face. "I don't have a sister anymore." Denise put her arm around Tessa and led her away. I stood on the courthouse steps, 4 months pregnant, completely alone. I'd lost my mother to cancer. I'd lost my father to shame and cowardice. I'd lost Kyle to disgust. I'd lost Tessa to betrayal. All I had left was the baby growing inside me, a constant reminder of the worst thing I'd ever done. And I had 5 more months to figure out how to live with that.